Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. G'day and welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. I'm Gord and this is my voice. On today's show, I had the very distinct pleasure of going for nearly 2 hours with a Mr. Chace Barber, who is the man behind Edison Motors, a small startup company, if you will, based in Merritt, British Columbia, that is building hybrid diesel-electric logging trucks. And to Chace's great credit, he's repurposing old trucks with new drive technology, including a couple of old 1960s model Kenworths. So the man's really going after my heart here with the older aesthetics, rather than building more new beige globalist mush. Chace has had quite a long history in the trucking business for such a young fella. He's driven all over the place, hauled oil rigs, hauled logs, drove truck over in the UK and on the continent. He also holds a degree in economics. Chace is a real character with lots of experience, insight, and knack for engineering. And we went pretty deep into some of the technical details of his trucks. How electricity and battery technology works and how it applies to vocational truck applications, grid requirements, how his trucks are going to save fuel and be cheaper to operate in the long run, and how they'll be better for the environment for real instead of all the fake crap we hear out there in the zeitgeist. I think you guys are really going to like this. It's like I say, nearly 2 hour long conversation. And Chace is just such an interesting guy. I'm really glad he was so generous with his time for me. Yeah, without any further delay, here is Mr. Chace Barber. All right, welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. I'm Gord. This is my voice. Gord. Oh, hi. Oh, and look at that. Our special guest today is already chiming in.
So sorry, today... is that too early?
No.
No, go on. You do the intro. It was beautiful.
You're very excited, sir, and that's good. I'm glad to hear you're pumped about this. You're as excited as I am. Good. So everybody, welcome to the show, Mr. Chace Barber, the impresario behind Edison Motors out in Merritt, British Columbia. Chace is a logging truck driver who is now building, for lack of a better word, electric logging trucks out of really old trucks that he's repurposing. So there's like recycling going on and electrical generation going on and batteries and all the stuff that the media likes to pump about electric vehicles, except Chace is doing it from scratch using older, much better looking equipment. And I'm very happy to have you here to tell us all about it, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
About
some electric trucks, I guess.
Yeah, and as I understand it, I have caught you at your office in Merritt, and you just had some kind of an emergency. Our recording has been delayed. What was going on?
Oh, we just had to get a project out to a customer, one of our solar things, and had to get it ready. And the boys needed a hand picking up some of the angle iron pieces because we got truck parts coming in tomorrow, or on, I guess, Monday. So I had to get this project out of the shop in order to clear space for the truck parts on the next truck to come in. You know, we built a brand new shop like a month ago, and we are already crowded for room.
Wow, right. So that implies success. That implies that you're busy and you're making things.
It does. We are getting busier and busier every day.
Right. So let's go back before we get into electric trucks. I want you to tell me and my audience and everyone listening, like a little bit of your life story, how you got into logging. Yeah, just go right from the start.
Right from the start, eh? So, well, after high school, I started driving a truck. Started out on like a little single axle snow plow, and then we moved over. I hopped got my full class one. And as soon as I turned like 19, like as soon I knew I was going to be a truck driver. So as soon as I was old enough, I hopped in a truck, got my class one, and started hauling freight, started hauling logs. I didn't, I loved it. And then but I decided I wanted to do long haul. So I drove all across Canada.
Who'd you
I
work?
did
Who did you work for when you were doing the cross Canada stuff?
Valley Roadways out of Kamloops.
I remember them.
Yeah, that was, oh, I'm dating myself, but that was before Landtran took it over and picked the whole thing up.
Yeah, no, and Landtran was like a subdivision of one of the companies that like ran the ice too, right? Weren't they owned by some people in Yellowknife or Edmonton or something?
Clecho.
Yes. Yeah, I did 4 seasons on the ice. I worked for RTL and then I worked for this owner operator with Economy Carriers.
Oh,
Um,
nice, nice. When
yeah,
Landtran took it over is kind of when I left. I got to actually go up there and do one season. Yellowknife running. I got to do one load up into Contueto, looping
oh,
mine.
no kidding. I took a bunch of fuel to Lupin 1 year because they were storing it off site for the other mine. What's the furthest one out that ended up getting mothballed?
Oh, it was
The
the one where they were going to build the road into Bathurst Inlet.
Well, there was that project, but there was another diamond mine over there that ended up getting mothballed, and I hauled a bunch of fuel in there. And the name's escaping me. The part of the investment team behind it was like Tiffany's Jewelers in New York City. A little history on that, but
Huh.
at the one season I was up there, we had corked them. They were like totally full, but they wanted to buy more fuel in case they ran out. So they rented the tank farm at the old Lupin mine, which is a little bit further back down the lake. So we hauled a bunch of fuel in there too.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So my life story is similar to yours. I started driving truck when I was basically in high school without a license at night, helping
Nice.
local guys like run around Hamilton hauling steel coils and whatnot. And then eventually over time did the whole long haul thing. Went out to BC and Alberta a bunch. I ran in the US mostly. Can you see my hat?
The Hayes hat?
Yeah, so
I was admiring that hat.
yeah, so I knew you would recognize that being a BC log trucker. So you know all about Hayes trucks, and they're no longer. And the Hayes had a dealership in Ontario that was owned by my boss's late father, Earl Paddock.
Ah,
And when Hayes went out of business, Earl Paddock was like one of the last dealerships still selling Hayes trucks. This was like in Hamilton in Ontario. And when Hayes went out of business, Earl, I don't know if he stole it or he bought the rights to the Hayes Bear. And now it's the logo for Paddocks. It's on all their mud flaps and all their jackets and their hats and stuff.
I mean, maybe he just took it. I mean,
Yeah.
company's under. Who's going to go after him?
Yeah. I should
Actually, I
ask.
guess Hayes is owned by Packard now. A lot of people don't know that. What happened was Packard from Kenworth and Peterbilt bought out Hayes. They literally bought the Hayes plant and then shut the entire thing down and never reopened it.
Oh, wow. A little bit of history. Hey, want to hear some more BC logging, BC log truck stuff? I hauled logs in New Zealand for a little while when I was 23. I went down under, and
Nice.
I've actually the first time I ever drove a Pacific logging truck was in New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah, I think they sent what, about 30, 40 of them down there. That would have
Yeah,
been late 60s, early 70s for the truck make year.
yeah. So the guy I worked for in New Zealand, this fellow named Colin Sargison, he owned a company called Rotorua Forest Haulage, and he had a couple of Pacifics. I didn't drive it full time. I was like, when I first started working for Colin, I was doing like evening fill-ins. So when guys would run out of hours, I would like meet them wherever with a company pickup and switch out and then take their load to whatever mill or go preload them for morning or whatever. So I sort of got to drive everything they had. And
Nice.
one of their off highway trucks, there's this really interesting forest in the middle of the North Island called the Kaingaroa Forest, and there's a system of roads in there called the Kaingaroa Off Highway. which were owned by the forestry company, and they're all private roads. So basically, they had two modes of moving logs. They would do full tree length. So you would have like a tri drive and then a pull trailer with a triaxle trailer. Or they would do cut to length or shorts. And then they had doubles. So you'll have two 45-foot trailers put together like a little road train because there's like no weight limit and there's not really public access to any of those roads. So they got some pretty interesting equipment. And in that Congaroo off highway system, they had this old Pacific set up as a tri drive pulling a pull trailer. All right, so enough about me. Back to you. So you're in BC, you're in Merritt, and eventually you stopped doing freight and you're doing logs. Yes.
I there was a little bit of a gap in between there, but between the freight and getting back into logs, I went to university. I made that choice.
Oh
I had
wow.
enough time. Yeah, I saved up a bunch of money, and the parents were pushing me like, "Yo, go to university, try that out." And I thought, like, okay, like I can't see like doing the long haul thing forever. Why don't I give it a try? I'm young, in my 20s. There's single girls at university. That sounds like a good time.
It sure does.
You know what? I could take 6-8 months off of work and go chase some girls. But no, went to school, and I immediately realized in school that by year 2, I still had a huge passion for trucking. I went back, drove truck in the summer, made good money. Went back, set up an elaborate scheme in the university, but went back to trucking in the second year and saved up enough money that I did really well in my GPA, that I got into a program where it was a work study program for the United Kingdom. So I took advantage of that in my third year, flew over to the UK, got my HGV Arctic, and so that I could drive trucks over in the UK and England for a while.
Nice.
Came back, drove truck for like a year because I was broke after spending all my money in university in England and having a good time.
So what school did you go to in Canada and what were you studying?
Thompson Rivers University, and I took economics.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I like knowing more about how businesses work and the whole finance thing on it. And I wanted to be a little bit more knowledgeable on the whole business aspect of trucking. And
Wow. So you know who Frederick Hayek is then? Ludwig von Mises, all those guys.
I can't. No, that name isn't ringing a bell for whatever reason.
Wow. Why am I not? Why am
Me.
I not surprised that a typical university didn't tell you about the Austrian economics guys? Oh man, that's a whole other podcast in itself. We'll set that aside.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So you're in the UK. Did you actually got trucking in the UK?
Yeah, I got a little trucking in over there. It wasn't a ton, but I got a little hopped in a.
Did you just like stay on the island, or did you go to Europe as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I drove all over mainland, and it would honestly, they have trucking really set up well over there compared to Canada.
In what way?
Their rest areas are like every 20 kilometers. You're all paid by the hour. I really like that all Europe, they mandated that you need to be paid by the hour. They said it was for safety. And I completely agree with it. Seeing the attitude in truck drivers that are paid by the mile or paid by the load compared to truck drivers that are paid by the hour. You hit construction, they slow down for the construction. They have no problem. They're paid hourly. They get a long wait time at a shipper. Well, no worry. They're paid hourly. You cannot compensate somebody for driving faster or being more aggressive. You have to pay them for all of their work time that they do over there. And they have lower accident rates per mile, and it's a lot more stress-free.
Wow, that's man, I'm there's so many people I talk to because one of my little side things is I read a lot of academics who study our business. That's one of the reasons I started this show. I'm going to be getting a few people on. There's this sociologist guy at University of Pennsylvania named Steve Viscelli who wrote this book called The Big Reg. He's a good buddy of mine now, and we talk all the time. And I'm going to send him this, and he's going to be like, yeah, paying by the hour.
Yep. Well, you know, when they did the e-logs in the US, they found that accidents didn't go down.
No, they went up.
Yep.
Did
And you know
the
why?
opposite.
Yep. because people were trying, they had to rush to make it. So driving faster, you have to make as many miles as possible in that time frame. And if you wanted to make your money or you get any delay, you got to make up the time. You
Well,
hit bad weather, you got to push through it. I think if the US and Canada really cared and gave a shit about safety, they do like what Europe does. You get paid hourly. They still have the tachograph, which is like our e-log, but
yeah.
get paid hourly from as soon as your log starts to as soon as your log finishes. You get paid hourly for all the time, and it doesn't matter. You hit bad weather and you have to slow down to be safe. You slow down. You hit bad, you're still getting paid. Right now, if you hit a snowstorm and you back out of the throttle and you're like, well, I don't want to do 110 kilometers an hour in this snowstorm, I'm going to slow her down to 80. You get paid less for being safe.
You know,
That's
it's
totally ass backwards.
yeah. I mean, there's a few companies here that are forward thinking and don't do that. After being on the ice, I went to work for. I was working for an owner operator, but his customer was a fuel distribution company in Edmonton, and they did
Ventures West?
no. I won't say. We'll
No,
try and
okay.
keep everything on the DL. You never know who's listening. I mean, I'm saying things positive about them, but like they paid by the hour, and it was like every hour. So if you got stuck on the side of the road because of an accident, you still build them. Weather's bad, you had to drive slow, you still build them. You get out to the site and a whole bunch of crap gets in your way and you can't get to the tanks to offload, you build them. You sit in line at the rack at Esso in Edmonton, you build them. So like there are people out there that understand that. Just they're in the minority here in North America, right?
Well, and I
And
think, oh, sorry, go on.
no, and I mean it's just hilarious. I mean, you studied economics. I mean, one of the first things they tell you in economics is like incentives matter, right?
Yep.
And game theory matters. If people are
Yep.
going to gain and they need to earn, and that's dependent on doing X, they're going to do X, right?
Yep.
So like you have to like yeah, you can't just dismiss that. And if you don't think about that when you're trying to set up like a regulatory framework, you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, 100%. And like right now you're incentivizing people to go faster to beat the e-log. You're incentivizing faster driving, more rush, pushing through the storm as fast as you can because your logbook's going to run out, and that makes no sense. And I think the problem is that you get a few good companies. They'll pay by the hour. They realize the increased safety. But then those companies right now in a free market, if you study economics, it have to compete against the companies that can pay by the mile, that don't pay their drivers any extra. It needs to be mandated by the government that when e-logs came in, you need to pay hourly. And I normally hate saying government mandates, but if they're going to mandate that we have e-logs and mandate how many hours to work, they should mandate that we get paid by those hours, because then that stops cut rate companies from coming in, hiring a temporary foreign worker, giving them 20 cents a mile, and then putting them in a truck. And you're like, oh, by the way, it's not paid load time, not paid anything. Like the good companies have a hard time competing against the shitty ones.
Yeah,
That's
well,
my issue.
yeah, no, 100%. I don't disagree with any of that. I think just the sort of nuance of it is like there's a lot of people who talk about free markets that A, don't actually mean it, and B, don't understand that like markets don't exist in a vacuum. And like you said, if you're going to mandate one thing, then you have to mandate all the things in order for that mandate to actually work, right? So, like, it gets messy. I consider myself like a free market guy, but you also have to take into consideration all of the other factors. And if you don't do that and you don't have like a practical look at it, like you say, you'll have all these other influences on what you're trying to achieve undermine them if you don't take all the rest of it into account.
Yeah, if the government makes a decision that says, hey, for safety, we want to step in and start mandating things, they actually have to like look at the whole picture of the mandates, or else it has the backwards thing. Like I can see why they would want to mandate safety, letting everybody exist in the wild west of, doing 22-hour days on chicken feed and running coast to coast and back. Yeah, I get why they put that in. Why don't they do it in a sensible way? That's my issue, is that mandate hourly. Like
right. So on this discussion of mandates and regulatory frameworks, I kind of want to like take it back to your truck project here. How are you finding like what's happening with Edison Motors? Actually, so Edison Motors, your new company that you're building trucks with, are you guys running into weird government stuff yet?
Yeah, absolutely. There's weird government things. We fall into a lot of gray zones, but they kind of benefit us. So I'm not going to go into them before the government figures out that the gray zones benefit us. There's certain things like, well, the you need to run e-logs if you have an ECM of a truck that's made not prior to 1999. Electric trucks don't have an ECM.
Ah.
And the way they kind of got around that is like, right now, electric trucks don't really require the e-log because their battery limits them. The
Right.
battery on the truck is they're like, well, there's no truck that can do over 14 hours a day that's electric. But
No,
now
I was
we put a diesel generator in there to recharge the batteries while the electric truck is moving. Now that is an auxiliary power unit, so there's no rule that says your auxiliary generator needs to have an ECM hooked up to an e-log.
yeah, that's a very interesting gray area.
And there's also weird rules that, like, because it's electric, it's obviously road tax exempt. Electric vehicles don't pay road tax. And it's classified as an auxiliary power unit, no different than if it was a generator making power sitting at a power station. And generators are allowed to run dyed diesel.
Oh, so you're not paying tax on the fuel either. Awesome.
Yeah, that's one of those weird ones that I'm sure they find out about. So no, any truck driver listening, shut up about that.
Man, so now that we're on, so Edison Motors, what's the genesis of Edison Motors? You go to school, you did you finish? Did you get your degree in
I
economics?
did, I did.
All
And
right.
I graduated with like a 4.0. Not
Oh
not
wow, good for
not to
you.
really brag here, but it sets the context of why I got so angry
the,
and went
mo-
back into trucking. So
the,
I
the, the
did.
the very modest Canadian truck driver right here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but so I got a 4.0, straight A's across the board in 4 years of university. Like never got lower than an A. And I got second place in the Bank of Canada Economic Forecasting Challenge for my recommendations on quantitative easing. And after all that, 4 years of university, I got offered a job at the Bank of Canada for that second place. And the starting salary was $45,000 a year. I went moving drilling rigs one summer of university, and I made over $50,000 moving drilling rigs in the summer as a truck driver in 4 months. So in 4 months as a truck driver, I could make more than I could as an entire year living in Ottawa with a 4-year university degree and a straight A average. So I said, this is stupid. This whole thing was a scam. 4 years of work, and I'm gonna make less money than I did just working in the summer. I would literally be better off moving drilling
Yeah.
rigs and then not working the next 8 months of the year.
I
So
would need to I need to interrupt you just for 1 second because
yeah,
there's lots of confusion out there about how truck drivers get paid because there's like trucking's very diverse.
yes,
You could be in the oil patch moving very heavy drilling equipment, making the money you made. You could be working for a freight company, hit bumping docks, getting delayed all the time, and it would take you all year long to make that 50 grand, right? So
oh
like
yeah,
there was a weird news item that came out a year or two ago that confused everybody because they didn't understand that like the company was advertising for owner operators and the truck was going to get paid like some ridiculous amount of money, like a couple hundred grand. But
yeah.
like it got sent around to all the media as Texas trucking companies paying their drivers $200,000 a year, and it's like no. We're
Jesus.
hiring owner operators, and that's what the truck could make, right?
Yeah, the
So just
gross.
yeah, so just for anybody listening, Chase's experience is because he was doing something very specialized, and not everybody's making that kind of cake.
Well, and it's paid by the hour trucking.
To that too. Oh.
You make better money because suddenly you're paid by the hour. Guess what? That's overtime after 50. After your 50 hours a week, you get overtime and you can agree to a rate and you get paid for everything you do. Obviously, you have to be, it's off highway, but like I after being an experienced truck driver, I would say you would have to be a sucker to work by the mile. You see what those mileage guys make OTR, and it's like go to Alberta, hop into a vac truck, hop into a tank truck, a winch tractor, and you can make 3 times the amount of money. Like it's just they're taking advantage of long haul truckers right now with that mileage rate.
Yeah, I heeded the call of go west, young man. I left Ontario and did 7 years in Alberta and the Northwest Territories. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. It,
So
oh no,
you
but going back to the trucking, yeah.
yeah,
So after
so
university, when I was
you
angry,
yeah, you're angry. You're like the bankers want to give me this not good enough salary. So you're like, I'm gonna go back log trucking.
yeah, and I met my good friend. We became business partners in our 4th year of university, and I said, "Okay, Eric, I got an idea here. We're gonna buy a truck. Well, we went to business school. We'll buy a truck, and we'll be trucking businessmen." we bought. We took the last of our student loans. Between us, I think we had like $10,000, and we bought a 1969 Kenworth 5-axle long logger that had been sitting in a guy's field for like 15 years. Our last semester of university, we spent all our days in the afternoons and weekends like restoring and fixing up this old truck, changing the electrical, the airlines, getting the whole thing rebuilt, repainted, and we put this old truck on the road.
Wow, that's awesome. My uncle Bruce, there's a photo. I wish I had it here. My dad has it. It's a picture of my dad when he's 14 or 15 years old with my aunt, who would have been at the time his little sister, and they're washing my uncle Bruce's 1968 Kenworth on the street in front of my grandpa's house in Hamilton.
Mm,
And
nice.
the photo is from like 1970, so the truck was only 2 years old. My uncle Bruce was an owner operator, and he pulled I think he pulled trains with it. I think he pulled two flatbeds, like a little A train going back and forth to Michigan, hauling coils.
Nice.
Uh,
Nice.
back then.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh, those are tough boys back then. That's for sure.
Mm.
But yeah, we sent that truck off to work and did logs at the very start, and then we got a contract through one of Eric's buddies for a mine that was up in the Yukon. So we head north in this old 1960s truck and hauling ore out of Wolverine mine up in the Yukon.
Awesome. Dude,
Yeah.
you've been everywhere. You trucked in Europe, you're hauling out of a mine in the Yukon, logs, you've been on the ice.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Damn.
I wanted to do it all, I guess, but
You got the international club that you've been all over the place.
fair enough, fair enough. People thought we were a little crazy though at that point when we were running up in the Yukon in a truck from the 60s. 40 below, barely has a heater, and we took that money we made and we bought a newer truck and had that second truck going, and then we bought another truck, and then the mine closed down and we got stiffed on like the last few months of payments, and we hit a rough patch again. You're like, oh shit, we got all our fuel bills. They stiffed us on like $80,000. We just bought another truck, and like I went down to Grand Prairie and went back into the oil patch doing some low bedding, and then we got another winch tractor after a little while, and but we got the opportunity to start doing generators and hauling some equipment that way, and then we were able to start installing them. We're like, okay, like we started looking and you're like, well, where's the money in this? We can haul it, but the guys making the money are the main contractors that they crane it off, they hire a crane, they place a generator down, they get people out there. I'm like, okay, these guys are the ones that are making the real big bank here. And Eric had always been in me. We're always a nerd about solar and these things. And Eric was sitting there, and I'll give it to him. That's my business partner. He came up with this way of making a hybrid system. He started looking at lithium batteries and he started thinking, and we started doing the math. And you take a diesel generator and that you put in a large battery bank and you let that battery take the peak load demand. You put in a bunch of solar, the solar maintains it in the daytime. And we got our first break at a project that was way up near Fort Nelson for this tiny little First Nations community. Like we begged and pleaded, be like, can we do the install? Can we do a project? And what they did is this one tiny First Nations, they had a 90 kilowatt hour generator. We went up, we resized the system to a 35, so down from 90 to 35, because when we looked at their power usage, they had a huge peak load demand at 5 o'clock. Everybody would get home from work, turn on all the appliances, and it would take a lot of power for 2-3 hours, and then it would drop right back down to nothing. But they had to put in a 90 kilowatt generator to meet that peak load, but that means that they were always running 90 kilowatt hour, like a much larger size motor.
Right. You're wasting a lot of fuel doing that.
Yeah. So the battery actually took the peak load demand. And then once we put the battery in, we realized we could put solar, and the solar in the daytime would actually recharge the battery because everybody's out at work. Nobody's home in the daytime. There's very little power usage. The daylight energy can just recharge the batteries. That battery gave the peak load demand, and then the generator wouldn't fire up until nighttime.
Right.
We billed about $140,000 to go do that project. I think they saved $85,000 in fuel the first year alone. So it was like a year and a half payback. And that covered the cost of the solar, the battery, the new generator, just on the fuel savings that they would have spent anyways.
Wow. So win for everybody.
Yeah. And like we started doing solar, and I started getting more and more frustrated with some of the trucks. Some of the ones I bought this one truck, and it was only 2 years old, but it spent more time at the dealership than it did on the road with fault codes and emissions and sensors and like just electrical gremlins causing
Oh
havoc.
yeah. Oh yeah. That's why everybody hates new trucks, including
Yep.
me.
We made a decision then, and it was made in part due to a mechanic we had who we fired. So the gist of the story, we fired a mechanic because he was selling cocaine at work.
Oh man.
Yeah, so we fired him. He then went to prison, got out of prison like a week later, all pissed off. I guess he had one of the keys for our bed truck, had a nice bed truck at the time, used the bed truck to smash up the other two trucks in the yard, and then destroyed the one truck.
Oh no.
I got lucky. Old Blue, that 1969, was parked at the house, at my house, so it didn't get touched.
Did you
So
ever get your hands on this sucker?
uh he went to jail for a while.
Wow. I mean,
I mean,
that's
I
that
met
that
him. I met him a few years after, like ago, like a couple of years ago. I ran into him in Edmonton, and you know what? He came and apologized.
Oh
He
wow.
he really got his life back on track. He admits he was at a low point. He was fucked up, and I guess I could have killed him at the time, but 2-3 years later, what he did ended up being a blessing for us. Everything said and done.
And okay, so what was the blessing so in the wake of this gentleman's low point in his life, and we live in a civilization which is informed by Christianity and the idea that you can forgive and move forward, and that's great. So he causes all this trouble for you. How did that end up working out well?
Well, we started doing these energy projects. And when this happened, we decided to have a look. Let's take a step back and let's reevaluate where we want this business to go. We got an insurance payout. Do we go rebuy the trucks, get another couple trucks running again, or do we go into more of the construction side? So we had that 69 Kenworth that was still a reliable hauler. I'm like, well, we can haul all the stuff we do. Like, we're a new company in the energy space. We're not getting a ton of work, but the work we're getting is way more profitable than the trucking. Like, one job every 3 months is like the profit from the trucking. Like, okay, let's go do that. And we moved back to where I was originally from, back to Merritt, BC. We went back and we Yeah, we just basically kept Old Blue, put the money into developing the products, getting some patents, and then we became suppliers to Finning and Caterpillar. So we became their we really went hard into it, and we managed to become the suppliers for Finning Cat. So all of Finning's solar hybrid projects in Western Canada, we do all their solar.
Nice.
Yeah, so that ended up going relatively well, and we ended up getting another truck again because it expanded and grew. But
And for
I think if
people who
we
don't know, anybody who's listening at home, Finning is one of these like, if you're familiar with like how Caterpillar or truck dealerships work, you'll have one company that'll own a whole pile of dealerships. I believe Finning is one of the biggest Caterpillar dealer groups basically in Canada. Like they
in
got
the
beast,
world,
they
they are
got.
the largest cat dealership in the world. Finning.
Oh, no kidding! I thought they were just like a BC Alberta thing.
No, no, they're Western Canada. They have South America, United Kingdom, England, Scotland is all Finning, and they have a bunch in Africa.
Oh wow, I stand corrected and am very impressed. Good for them.
Yeah, no, no. I think they are the largest. Like you look at their share price online, and like Finning is almost worth as much as Cat is, which is crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, and then we ended up getting a light tower. We made this solar light tower, and one of our designs that we came up. I came up with this. I'm pretty proud of it. But we ended up going through the product testing, and we got it licensed as a Caterpillar product.
Wow. Wow. Good for you, man. This is the whole story. Like, how many more steps till you get to Edison? Like, you just
Well,
keep.
that's where we're about.
Well, so full disclosure, I first heard about you through my buddy Justin, who's one of the guys at Freight Waves, does Back the Truck Up podcast.
Oh yeah, yeah, you betcha.
Yeah. So
Good guy.
yeah, the couple of times you've done with like Justin and Dooner on their shows, it was a bit shorter than what we're doing here, and I had no idea the like depth of your background story, and I'm just floored about all the cool shit you've done, and like we haven't even got to Edison yet, man. Keep going.
Yeah, I guess that recap trucking to doing truck and power systems to installing power systems to designing and engineering the power systems to becoming contractors to do the power systems to designing our own product. And it was doing a project where I thought about it. I'm like, because classic trucks were always our passion there. And I started thinking about it in the truck I was driving. I was actually driving Old Blue, that old 1969 Kenworth, and I realized that a truck is pretty similar to the way a power grid works. That has a huge peak load demand. When you're getting and building that initial inertia, getting the truck moving, you require a ton of power. Once you're up to speed, you don't require much power. And then you start looking at the advantage of electric motors, super high torque, incredibly efficient. It's just the battery was the big killer. And we tried to make a battery electric. We looked at like, I reserved a Tesla semi. I believe in electric. Yeah, yeah, no, I know. Poor financial decisions have been made.
No. This is great. I love it.
But yeah, that was before we even like started the power systems. Like when we were like just kind of looking, I reserved that Tesla semi like 5 years ago. Like we're still in Grand Prairie moving drilling rigs at that point. And but yeah, I started thinking, I'm like, the batteries aren't there. Batteries are not gonna cover a logging truck or a heavy haul truck, even if the torque and all the power is there. So I'm
Right.
like,
And so speaking of Tesla and batteries, so Tesla just had like their big, reveal showcase thing like a week or two ago.
yeah.
And they did a demonstration where they showed they could go however many hundreds of miles on one charge. But one of the little interesting details that stood out was that they weighed it at 81,000 and they had to get a permit either from the state of California or Nevada to get that extra 1,000 pounds, which was to accommodate all the extra batteries and then get an actual full load in the trailer that you would normally get. Right. Like they
It's
needed
not
it.
a permit for extra weight. You automatically get extra weight. It's one of like, how they give you like a 500-pound additional weight in some states if you have an APU. Certain states and provinces give you like an extra 1,000 pounds or 2,000 pounds if you have an electric truck, because they say that it's heavier, so therefore you shouldn't be penalized if we want electric to be a thing. Like British Columbia gives you an extra 1,500 kgs if you have an electric truck, so like 3,200 pounds more.
Oh wow! So in the winter we should just lie to ICBC so that we can get away with all the snow,
or get an Edison one, and then you're good.
Yeah. Oh man, that's amazing.
Actually, that's a funny. We automatically get that exemption with our electric retrofit trucks because they're classified on their registration as electric.
That's awesome. So
the funnier part is when we built it, so that 1962 Kenworth, it weighed 9,000 kgs before we started the project. When we were done, it weighed 8,800. So we lost 200 kgs by making it diesel electric. And then the government gives us an extra 1,500. So we get 1,700 kgs more in payload.
Wow. Dude, you have this on lockdown, man. So for people, so one of the things when I started looking into your trucks, and like the first thing that struck me was like, this is a locomotive. Locomotives, like big trains, that's exactly how they work. There's a huge diesel engine which drives a generator, which drives the electric motors that are attached directly to the wheels underneath the train, right? Yep. So like this concept that you're using
it's not new.
It's not new by any stretch of the word, but I'm just like, why didn't anyone like think about this? Was it like the lack of battery tech? Like what was preventing other people? I'm not trying to take away from like you and your team to say that like, you know, you guys are special or something, but like somebody else must have thought of this.
One of the big issues we actually dealt with, and I would say that it is due to the pioneering that like Tesla did do on their batteries that other companies have adapted, and it's the C rating on the battery. So
what does C rating mean?
The C rating is the amount you can discharge. Say if you have 100 kilowatts battery, if you have a 1C rating, you can discharge 100 kilowatts of power at a time, and that battery will drain over an hour. If you have a 4C rating, you can discharge 400 kilowatts of power out of that 100 kilowatt battery, which means it'll only last for 15 minutes, but you can discharge more power. So the big advantage there is on a freight train, the weight isn't an issue. They use large capacitor banks, which are incredibly heavy, but can take and discharge at almost an infinite C rating. And they would just flow into these large capacitor banks that was like half of the weight of the locomotive, and massive capacitors that they would discharge that energy, or it'd be just direct drive motors with variable frequency drives. So what we did differently is by putting in those 4C rated batteries, we could essentially put in a megawatt of drive motor power, 1,000 horsepower drive motor with a very small battery, because that battery can then give that peak load demand. And it works at that, like the battery at full discharge for what our drive motors can take will deplete the battery in like 20-30 minutes. But that's more than enough at 1,000 plus horsepower to get you up and moving. If that C rating wasn't there, you wouldn't be able to do it. I would need to put in almost a megawatt battery in the truck, which would be 50,000 pounds.
Right. Okay. So, another comparison I want to make for those listening who, you know, they probably get the locomotive thing, but the fact that this is a hybrid drive, like basically your trucks are a big Toyota Prius in a manner of speaking.
It's technically a little bit different than hybrid for legal purposes. Is hybrids are road tax exempt or not road tax exempt.
Right.
And hybrids need to run their motor when the vehicle's moving. Like they need to run their motor. The motor needs to work with the batteries. The difference with the diesel electric is it can run without the generator. If you took that generator out of the truck, it would make no difference in performance of the vehicle whatsoever. It is 100% able to operate completely off electric. It is just electric that carries around its own electrical power station is the best way to. It's not a hybrid. It's electric with its own power station on board.
Right. So, with that in mind, I remember in watching one of the videos of yours, I can't remember if it was on TikTok or on Justin's program, where you explained that your truck would have regenerative braking, which is something that hybrid cars have. And the idea being that if you're driving a logging truck specifically in BC, you're in the mountains and there's a whole lot of potential energy from those logs hurtling down the hill that the truck is now harnessing to charge the batteries, so that like when you run out of inertia rolling the truck, the motor can then kick in and use the power generated from going down the hill to now keep it going. Do I have that
That's
correct?
Right. Yep, that's actually why we reserved a Tesla Semi years ago, was that basic principle.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it meant logging in BC, you're empty going up the mountain, you're loaded coming down. Holding back that power is all wasted energy off that Jake. In regen, you refill your batteries, you get to the mill, you go back up the hill empty. You could, in theory, run indefinitely off that stored logs. And that's not just a theory. There's a few places that are actually doing that. There's a mine up in Norway and another one down in South America, that one is running an electric train, and the regen on the train for holding the weight back of the iron ore recharges the batteries for the train to go back up the mountain. Another one is running haul trucks, electric haul trucks, that recharge their batteries going down. The ore is at the top of the mine, and where they dump is at the bottom. And it literally, these trucks produce more energy than they actually consume, and they need to have a snubbing unit dissipate the extra energy because it's literally more than this truck ever needs. They've been running for like a few years and have never had to plug in or recharge. So a logging truck in BC is the same principle.
Right. So, let's say you're not logging. Let's say we take an Edison Motors truck and we bang it onto a triaxle 53-foot reefer loaded with blueberries out of Surrey or somewhere in Abbotsford, maybe. And we're going to head to Toronto with it. And we get out past Calgary, and now it's flat until you get to Ontario. What happens?
Oh, you really don't get much for fuel savings. You maybe get 5%. I tell people straight up, and I'm honest with them. It's not the application for it. It's not. You can gear a truck pulling light, low, 80,000 pounds of freight on the highway that's all aerodynamic. You can get it geared to where it's just kind of running at that motor's peak RPM. And like those trucks tend to be a little bit slower off the line. They're not running 600s with 18 speeds. You know, you're going to get some savings. It's going to be more efficient, but you might be getting 5, 10, 15% in that 5 to 15% fuel saving range. And that's cool. I get it.
In our current economic circumstances, and given that like trucking is a hyper marginal business and the profit margins are so skinny, even using your truck where you might save 5 or 10% on fuel, 5 or 10% on fuel is a big deal in the trucking business, dude. Like, I wouldn't sell yourself short.
You know what? It is, but it's like, we'll make them, but it's not the application that really can do the most good with this technology. Like it exists to help. It'll help it, but look at the heavy things. Like you're running 1,000 horsepower drive motors. The torque is double the amount of torque of an X15. It's literally double a 550 X15's amount of torque and almost double the horsepower. Like, you want to be able to move heavy loads. Putting it onto an 11 axle low bed, that's where your advantage comes in, when you gotta get that much weight moving. Putting it on a vac truck makes sense. You know, like places that needed to run external power, we could run off that batteries. You could run a hydrovac for about 3-4 hours off the battery alone. That means no engine noise, no pollution from the noise on site as you're operating. Stop and go gravel trucks. Gravel trucks are often 8-axle gravel wagons.
Yeah.
They're stopping and going in city traffic all day long, pulling full 140,000-pound loads of gravel in stop and go traffic. That's where that regenerative braking, slowing the truck down, using a ton of energy to get it moving to the next light. That's where it makes sense. That's where you're going to start seeing that 50, 60% savings.
Right.
Logging, you're seeing 80%. But like, we can only build, we're a small company. We can only build so many trucks. I've had a few larger companies really reach out, and I've had to tell them, like, I'm sorry, Purelator, but like, it's not the best showcase of our technology right now. We've got companies interested that like they want to do the heavy haul, the vocational aspect, build a snow plow because it can do all the extra features electronically, and that's where it's good at. The harder you work an electric truck, the better it's going to do.
Right. That's really interesting. I'm sidebar to all this. I'm going to point at my hat again. My ex-employers in Ontario, the Paddocks, do quite a bit of heavy haul stuff. I'm gonna have to tell Scott Paddock about you, man. You guys have to talk. He's the sort of guy that would try out one of your trucks and put it through its paces. And another application. Logging is not the same everywhere, right? So you're in BC, quite hilly. Well, obviously it's the Rocky Mountains. You got the Coast Mountains up again, and then you got different mountains up north. Logging in northern Ontario and northern Quebec is more flat, and they pull, those 4 and 5 axle pulp trailers, or the similar wood chip liner B trains, like them guys like Chambers, I think in BC. Like I have hundreds of them things running all over the place. You see a lot of them in northern Ontario, northern Quebec. I live in the United States now, right? So I married an American. I live in upstate New York. There's a lot of logging around here, but it's hardwood, right?
Yep.
And this is Appalachia. And they don't, in this part of the US, there's no B trains, there's no big trailers, but in upstate New York, you can get what's called an R permit. And with an R permit, you can have 7 axles on the ground, and you can go up to 117,000 pounds. And nice. a lot of the logging here is done quite a bit on private land and smaller woodlots. It's not like in huge blocks like in northern Alberta or BC. It's different, and it's hilly. It's not the same kind of mountains, but it's still hilly. It's Appalachia, right? But we use self-loaders here. Like 80% of the logging trucks here are self-loaders. So I'm wondering if like you have an Edison truck with the electric power bank, you could easily run a PTO off that to run a hydraulic picker, so you can like load yourself and unload yourself, right?
100%. Yeah. And it's like, that's the thing that like, that's one of the big advantages of being electric, is that you can run like those little pickers probably use 40 horsepower. That's probably about where their equivalent is on their motor. They're not super huge, 50 to 100 horsepower.
And yeah, so yeah, I hear exactly where you're going with this, right? So like I don't operate a picker. I was supposed to. My boss was going to rebuild one, but then inflation happened and the economy down here is a bit of a shambles. Long story short, but my buddy Roy drives the picker truck that's still on the road, and he's got an X15 Cummins. And while he's running that picker, the engine's set at 1,300 RPMs to run the wet line to run his picker. But like if it only needs 40 or 50 horsepower, that thing's sitting there running at 1,300 revs. How many horsepower is it putting out right now?
Yeah, what, 450 horsepower?
Right. And so Roy, on average, he only averages like 3.5, 4 miles a gallon. And it's not from the going up and down the road. It's every time he sets up to load and unload, and he's got the engine at high idle to run the picker. If you remove that idle time and he goes through a lot of it to run the picker, your fuel savings are going to be incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, all your picker time is done. Like you could probably run a picker off the batteries in our truck. You could run that picker for about 4 or 5 hours, fire the generator up, and burn about 30 liters of fuel in half an hour. and it would recharge the batteries to run it for 4 hours. So you get 8 hours of picker running for half hour of fuel, as opposed to running 8 hours constantly with a motor that's even bigger. This is what I'm saying. It's like, it makes so much more sense to do it
Oh,
that
wow.
way.
I'm going to have to buy one of your trucks and go into competition against my boss.
There you go. Oh, but it's, it's one of the most frustrating things I find with diesel electric, because a lot of people have said, what about the highways, those dry vans? The question that you asked. And I read an article put out by Freightliner, and they looked at the hybrid system. What about the diesel electric? And they said, well, at 5%, 10% fuel mileage savings, it's really not there because the trucks are already geared really efficiently. This academic article was about 20 pages long, and not once anywhere in this article did they even talk about the vocational industry. Freightliner and the people writing these papers had completely forgotten that garbage trucks, crane trucks, picker trucks, gravel, like they forgot that all of these things existed.
If I might be so bold, the world of freight is white people, and vocational trucks is people of color and various gender identities that are oppressed.
Vocational? I always looked at that backwards.
No, but you know what I'm saying, though, in the perception, like they're the majority. Everybody pays attention to the freight market. I'm totally taking the piss here.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm picking up.
Yeah, no. Like when people talk trucking, they just like think of like, again, reefer trailers, box trailers, everything they see on the highway, and they don't realize that trucking is super diverse in all the industries it serves. There's a million different applications under the sun. They're not all the same. And we can't all just think about like stamping out a gazillion Volvos to haul 53-foot box trailers. There's other things going on and other places you can save money and make emissions improvements and fuel cost savings, right?
Yeah, and it's such a niche thing, that vocational, that like it's such a low volume that they just don't care. There's 5,000 logging trucks operating in BC, like 5,000 logging trucks, and most of them have a 10-year lifespan, which means that there's 500 logging trucks sold in BC across basically 5 different truck manufacturers, which means if each truck manufacturer is lucky, they might sell 20, 30 trucks per year across all their dealerships that are built for logging. You probably look at the same in theory, and like, so you add up all the Kenworths and okay, we sell like 200-300 vocational trucks a year in the province. You look at someone like Freightliner, they sell 500,000 or 400,000 highway trucks per year, all made the exact same on the same assembly line with the same specs and the same thing. And then they look at it like, oh, well, vocational, now they have different axle spreads, and this one's a tandem steer, this one's a tri-drive, this one's got this kind of frame, double frame, triple frame, so many different things that it's such a niche that they just don't care. They would never spend the engineering money and dollars to tackle something that's that low volume.
Right, yeah, because they don't get the economies of scale out of it. Can I bring you back to something really quick? So,
yeah,
you mentioned the number of logging trucks in BC, and I remember in one of your presentations, you were talking about the generating capacity of hydro in BC in total, right?
Yes.
So there's total amount of electricity that the province of British Columbia generates, and then there's the amount that's used by homes and businesses and industry, and then the idea of electrifying trucks, right?
Yep.
And so I got into an argument on Twitter the other day with this guy who was going off about how Tesla was going to put everybody else out of business. And I said to him, there's probably 5 million trucks on the road in North America, if not more, and they do trillions of miles a year. We do not have the electrical generating capacity, much less the grid, much less the network of charging stations for Tesla to put diesel trucks out of business right now. It's just not happening. And like he couldn't wrap his head around how much electricity we're talking about in order to power one semi truck.
They don't. Truck stops would need the equivalent of power of cities.
Right. So crunch some numbers from what you know in BC. I need to play.
Let's just look at those 5,000 logging trucks. And I bring out my calculator here, so I make sure I get the math right. 5,000 trucks. A logging truck uses about 2.5 megawatts of power per day. Now, I just want to compare that to what the battery technology. Tesla Semi has the largest battery of any electric semi truck on the market. They have 0.8 of a megawatt, 0.8 of a megawatt, and a logging truck uses 2.5. So already battery technology needs to get 3 times the size to make that feasible. But let's look at the energy uses. That's what we're talking about. So 5,000 logging trucks at 2.5 megawatts per day is 12,500 megawatts. So 12.5 gigawatts of power.
Per day.
Sightsee per day. Every single day, 12.5 gigawatts. Sightsee Dam only has a capacity of 1.5 gigawatts. That big dam in northern BC that they spent $20 billion to build over the last 15 years and flooded 15,000 acres of farmland will only do less than a tenth of the total usage of just logging trucks. And that's a really niche industry of trucking that makes up a small volume of the whole thing. Would literally need another 10 or 11 Sightsee dams. You're talking at that level. You'd have to flood an amount of farmland the size of the United Kingdom. Basically, you would have to flood like a quarter of the province. And you would spend over $200 billion just to charge electric logging trucks.
Never mind all the other trucks that haul groceries or lumber or fuel or anything else. Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to ask you this, so like my wife's brother is something of an engineer, and he works in like renewables. He works for an engineering firm here in Ithaca. He's totally plugged into all of this stuff, and he's a big booster of renewable power and grid upgrades, and he's very well versed in all of this stuff.
Nice.
However, he also leans towards this like utopian vision of like getting renewables to do everything. And I tried to tell him about your idea of these diesel electric hybrid trucks, and I don't know if he wasn't paying attention to the video I sent him, but he said like the physics don't make any sense. Like he gave me some flippant fucking response, and I tried to like explain to him like if you want to have electric vehicles and if you want to have electric trucks, the power generating capacity we have in North America has no hope of ever actually powering them as it stands right now. Right.
Yeah.
And so what I was trying to say is like, it's all good to have these visions of like, you know, renewable power, you know, you want to reduce emissions, you want to make things more efficient. That's great. But between here and Utopia, you have to have steps. Right.
And that's where I've been saying, like, beating my head off the dash, is that the diesel electric makes sense. It's going to be almost impossible to go 100% diesel to 100% electric. That's not the way the real world works. You know what? If doing this diesel electric, having the generator with the electric batteries and the motor, you can start your day plugged into the shop with a full charge. You get 2 hours of driving, and then you got to fire that generator up, and then it's going to run more efficiently, consume half the amount of fuel. Well, already we're making good progress to reducing emissions. But as battery technology gets better, that battery that's in there, all of a sudden, instead of being a 250 kilowatt hour battery, is now a 400. Now you can get 4 hours of driving. Now in the future, all of a sudden it's a megawatt. Well, now half the day can be on that. And then as the battery gets better, the engine size gets smaller. Instead of a 9 liter, you got a 6. Instead of a 6, now you got a 4. Now you got a 1 liter, little backup in case you need to run into an emergency bind. That's the natural transition, is that to make the diesel smaller as the batteries get bigger. As more power and more capacity gets on the grid with things like renewables that take decades to build these projects, it's going to take decades, and you're going to get more and more power hitting the grid as more trucks want to charge more and do more things with their batteries. That it's the natural transition. Plus, then you're going to get the mechanics who have experience working on the electric drive motors, working on the high voltage batteries, because people in the tech world seem to forget that trucks break. You need mechanics who are experienced and able to work on these trucks. Getting the technology out there means that they're going to be able to work on it, which means you can get the technology out there. There's positive feedback loops on all this.
Right. Yeah, it's something that I think people don't quite understand, is that the trucking industry moves so much freight in Canada and the United States and so many other countries, and trucking companies and the truck manufacturers and service centers have like networks of parts distribution and service places and repair shops with people that know how to fix things when they break. And if all of a sudden you just like plop and say, okay, cool, everybody has to do electric vehicles now, but you don't have the parts distribution in place, you don't have the people that are trained. I heard an interesting thing about like electric trucks having like so much power in them that like you kind of have to lock them out, and you need to have a second mechanic helping when someone's working on them, just because the like the safety considerations of all the juice going through them. Did I hear that correctly or no?
Well, the locking out one is absolutely correct. You need to disconnect your power somehow if you're going to be servicing any of the electrical things, because that battery can be live. And that battery has enough. There's not many things on a mechanical truck other than like dropping a transmission on your head that are going to kill you immediately. On these trucks, if you don't know what you're doing and you start, it's like working on any industrial machine in a sawmill or a plant. You need to lock it out. If it has power that can go to it, you need to lock it out. Disconnect your high voltage. It's normally a big lockout switch. You put a switch, you put your lock on it so that nobody can re-energize it. Then it is then safe to disconnect your high voltage lines. The thing about needing the second mechanic, what that normally is that they have an expert in the EV side to make sure that the mechanic has the knowledge that to lock it out before servicing. It's basically a second set of eyes to make sure that the guy doesn't kill himself, because it's new, the potential's there, they don't want anything to go wrong. If you got an experienced mechanic like our guy that we have, I don't need a second guy watching him. He can just do everything on his own. He's not going to kill himself. He knows what he's doing. He's an expert in it. But it just takes that little bit of training.
Right. So while we're talking about this technical stuff, I was looking at your website earlier, and you are still using regular differentials, and your power, your electric motor is still going through a drive shaft into a normal set of differentials. Is that correct?
The prototype is. The very first one we did, because the e-axles had a 16-month lag time, because while it's a tri-drive configuration that we ordered. So in order to make sure that our generator, the power rectification to charge the batteries, and our control system and all that worked, we literally grabbed a Tesla Model S motor, welded up the spider gears, and then welded a drive shaft onto a Tesla motor, into a 4-speed auxiliary, into the normal rear ends, just so that we could test everything else out in the truck.
That's some backyard engineering, bro.
Oh, purely backyard. But I mean, sometimes you need a little bit of backyard hillbilly engineering to get things done. I guarantee you, if we were a large company, they would have put the whole project on hold for 6 months and paid a team of 30 engineers to sit around twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah, no, and you can't. When you don't have the resources for that, you can't do it. And I believe these brothers, I think they went by the last name Wright, managed to get an airplane off the ground working out of their own garage. Right?
Yep.
Do I have that story straight?
I believe you do. Yeah. Oh, you know
Yeah.
what I've always said is that I would rather have a team of 4 or 5 skilled bush mechanics than 40 or 50 engineers from Silicon Valley. Those 4 or 5 bush mechanics will build you a truck a hell of a lot quicker than 40 or 50 engineers will.
Yeah, no, amen, brother. I've been I remember, oh man, I was in Colville Lake in the Northwest Territories at the very north end of the Mackenzie Valley Winter Road. And an airline snapped underneath my trailer and I was losing air and I had to get underneath it and fix it and it was 53 below zero.
Oh,
Yeah, a little frosty, and something tells me that Silicon Valley engineer guys may not have wanted to do that. I don't know.
I don't believe that those California Silicon Valley engineers, but
Oh,
yeah.
hey, it's on that story. How's your unit work in the cold?
Oh, wicked good. Wicked good. Oh, it's awesome. So much nicer. Oh,
Okay. So yeah, okay, so when I was on the ice, my buddy Alden from Saskatchewan got asked to drive this Kenworth, which had one of the newer regen DEF emission control systems on it. And this is back when they were first coming out in 2007, 2008.
yeah,
And
yeah.
long story short, a whole bunch of those systems, when they got employed on the ice, um, didn't work out very well. Let's put it that
Nope,
way.
not at all.
And so I'm curious to know how again, I'm stupid. I don't know anything about electricity. I'm gonna assume the worst about my audience and that a bunch of them don't either. So tell me how this thing's gonna deal with the cold, how the batteries deal with the cold.
Okay, so
How's
lithium
this work?
batteries in the cold, here's how lithium works. They won't take a charge. You cannot charge lithium batteries if they're below zero, but they can dispel all their energy when they're below zero. Totally fine. So you can
Okay.
get all the power out of them. Now, in a normal electric vehicle, the big problem is that the batteries use their own energy to keep themselves warm, and that's where they get that massive range degradation from. They use a ton of power to run a heater that circles glycol and, well, engine coolant through the batteries. It heats up, like electrically heats up coolant, and then circulates it around the batteries just to keep it warm so that you can plug it in so that the regen works.
Yeah, it's
Obviously,
eating itself to live.
it is literally eating itself to live.
Yeah.
We got around this way. Really simple is that we use a diesel heater off the diesel fuel tank. So
Okay.
you use the diesel you use the diesel to fire up, keep the coolant warm, which also keeps your cab warm. So basically we took a diesel pro heat, like just an APU diesel little pro heat system, Wabasso, and that circulates the coolant around the batteries, keeps them all warm so they can take their charge. And there's no cold start ever. You at 40 below, you're not like, oh, is the truck gonna fire up or not? No, it's electric, it will go. And that cab heat has been running all night long, so your cab is toasty warm as soon as you hop in it in the morning. It's never cold started. You can just immediately put your foot into it and start driving. And while the generator fires up, normally, 30, 40 below, you got to let that engine warm up for half an hour if you get it started, even if you even shut it off at all.
Right.
I mean, it takes a lot of cranking amps to get that thing going in the wintertime.
Yeah,
And then,
diesel engines don't run correctly at less than operating temperature.
nope, nope. And that's why, we can circulate that coolant around the top end of the motor. And we have a really unique ability where you don't need to start it off of the starter motor. So we can, with the alternator system on there that's designed for the back of the truck, the generator and the alternator on the back end where the transmission goes can actually crank the flywheel at 1600 RPM with the full force of that battery. So you're getting, instead of a starter motor, the starter motor has about 3 kilowatts. You can crank that motor with 300 kilowatts. It is not going to be slow. The coolant has already kept the top end of your block warm.
Wow, you guys have thought of everything.
We got some real clever people here.
Wow, that's amazing. So, something else I want you to describe for the listeners who might not understand this. I'm sure some of them do, some of them might not. When the diesel generator is being used on your truck to charge the batteries, if you haven't gone down a hill in a while, um, if you're running that diesel generator, obviously because it's not tied directly to the wheels or the transmission, it just runs at a steady RPM, correct?
Yes.
Explain to everybody what the benefits are of the steady RPM on a diesel engine, both in fuel efficiency and exhaust.
Okay. Yes. So the generator runs at its peak RPM all the time, where it's most efficient. So you get the best fuel mileage. And in a normal truck, you shift gears, the motor lugs down, you lose your turbo boost, you throttle into it, the exhaust comes out, spins the turbo, which gives you the air to give you the correct air fuel air ratio. Then you get that surge of power that you feel as a truck driver as the truck launches.
Oh, I love that though. We all love that.
We all love that. But as the generator, it exists, it lives there. It never leaves that spot. It never leaves that full turbo boost, heavy throttle like it likes. So, which means it's running incredibly efficient. No soot loading, no carbon loading of the exhaust. It's running hot. It's running where it should. And it also almost doubles the lifespan of that diesel motor.
So your APU diesel engine that's on your truck only to power the batteries when necessary is also going to last a whole lot longer than a normal motor would. It's running more efficiently. And what is this? How's that help with the emissions?
It massively makes it easier to clean the emissions. You rarely have fault codes on generators. Like you talk to generator diesel technicians, they rarely have emissions issues on the generators because it's always burning hot gas and it's rare. It like other than the initial startup, it doesn't soot load. It always has its perfect fuel air ratio that the motor was designed to run at. So you're not loading up your EGR, your DPF, your DEF system. It's just running super clean. So it doesn't have to, the emissions don't have to work hard.
On that note, given that the diesel engine on one of your trucks is considered an APU, would it be required by law to have a DEF, like say a selected catalytic reduction system or any other emission control system on it? And if not, does the government would regulators see the benefits as you've just described them and exempt them from such? Like, where does this fall legally?
Remember at the start of this episode where I said I'm not commenting on certain things because they'll figure it out?
All right, no further questions. No further questions.
Question answered, I think.
Right. Well, I mean, it's self-explanatory though. Like this is the thing, right? Like there's regulation which is supposed to accomplish something, but quite often you can accomplish the same thing doing something differently. But if the government doesn't recognize it, technically you're not allowed to do that thing. But that's just a matter of compliance, and compliance doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah, it's all about meeting the emission standards. How you get to the emission standards doesn't matter. So a generator can meet tier 4 emissions without DEF fluid. Whereas the truck with its carbon loading and the NOx loading needs that DEF.
Right.
So you can meet those emissions easier, if that makes sense.
Right, because it's running at a steady RPM at peak torque all the time. Right. And
that's if the auxiliary power generator units are required to have that.
Right.
And they're not.
Right.
They only need to meet the emission standard of the year that the engine was built. The truck isn't required to have, if it's a 2023 truck, there's no law that says auxiliary equipment on the truck all has to be made in 2023. You could buy a 2023 cement truck and you could take a cement body from 1970 and put it on the cement body. That's legal. You could have a truck and mount a mobile power plant to the unit, say like a light tower light plant for running a drilling rig. There's no law that says that 2023 truck that's packing the generator for the drilling rig or the service rig needs to have a 2023 generator to match the truck.
Well, it's
There's
like
no...
it's like here in the United States with their ELD mandate. The ELD mandate is predicated on the model year of the engine, not the tractor. So
Yeah.
you can buy glider kits. I can go and order a Peterbilt tomorrow if I could get one. I might get it in 2025, but if I buy a glider kit and put a 1997 cat in it, I am exempt from all of the emissions stuff because the engine's a 97, and I'm exempt from having an ELD.
Honestly, though, like I think they're getting rid of the glider kit exemptions. Like you can't even buy glider kits anymore.
Well, I know in BC they were clamping down on that, but like if they did that here in the United States, there would be a revolution.
Well, what I don't get, and the honest thing I do not understand at all, you're spending all the money on the glider kit, but then they've got a brand new truck body. Like, do something cool. Buy a 1973 Kenworth W900A model, paint it up like the Smokey and the Bandit, and then put that new. Like, the amount of money and time you are spending to build the glider kit with, you can go to PG Adams, get you set a brand new frame rails, set a Hendrickson suspension. You can drop a 3406 in there, and all you are buying from, if you buy the new glider kit, is an overpriced pile of fiberglass. They're going to charge you 50 grand for that new style body. I tell you what, you take that same 50 grand that you're spending on that new style, check out a scrapyard, find a W900A model cab, drop it on there. You've got the coolest truck that's all brand new. And then if they ever come out and you're like, well, that's a new truck, it's just got a glider motor and an exemption, you're like, fuck no, it's not. It's a 1973 Kenworth. It's not a glider kit. It's just a restored truck. Like, I don't get why everyone makes new trucks as gliders when the old ones are so cool.
Well, and this ties into something again, discussions I've had with my very, environmentally sensitive brother-in-law is carbon footprint, right? Yeah. My own personal vehicle is a 1998 Toyota Tacoma that I bought secondhand in 2005. I'm the second owner, and I've had it ever since.
Nice.
It's 24 years old.
That's the way to do it.
I've had it for 17 of those 24 years, and I'm going to drive it till it's dead or I'm dead, whichever comes first. What is more damaging to the environment in toto if I go out and buy a brand new 2023 Ford whatever? What is the total carbon footprint of that brand new Ford? How much money am I spending? And like, if I just keep my old pickup alive and just drive it around as is, like, carbon footprint means something. And if you keep like recycling and repurposing stuff that's already built, that hasn't gone through the manufacturing process and the assembly process, like, you take a pickup truck or any vehicle and factor in the hundreds, if not thousands of parts in it, all of the raw material that went into it, and do the entire carbon life cycle of everything that went into that truck, the trucking of all the parts, the whole shebang, like, that's a lot of embodied energy and a humongous carbon footprint. Whereas if you take...
There's a saying.
What's that?
There's a saying in the actually in the environmental sustainability when it comes to cars is that the most environmentally sustainable car you drive is that you can own is the one that you already own. The best car you can get for the environment is the one you already own. Which they're saying is like, don't go buy a new one. If it comes to the choice and like it's on its last legs and it's done, like the car is done, then yes, look at an environmentally efficient car. But it makes absolutely no sense to, if you have a Dodge Charger, to go trade in for a Tesla, because the environmental damage in making that new Tesla for you is still just as bad. And then that Dodge either gets thrown out, which doesn't happen, but somebody else buys it, they drive it, so there's no offset to the emissions there. And then whatever car they had for the Dodge, they trade it down and it just trades on. And like, it's not creating less pollution. It's just you're making a new car. That's one of the reasons why Edison Motors does one of the reasons why we offer retrofits. We don't need to sell somebody a brand new truck to make those environmental. If you care about the environment and you've got a perfectly good Kenworth that's sitting in there and you just say, I want it to be more efficient, more environmentally friendly, like that's my main goals. Take it in there. We'll drop those axles off. We'll put in the e-axles. We'll drop a fuel tank. We'll put in a battery bank. We'll reconnect our ECMs, and that truck can roll back out. Drop the transmission, put the generator on. That truck will roll back out of the shop. We didn't need to manufacture a new cab. No new frame rails. No new seats. No new headliners. All the plastic that didn't need to get remade into it. Like,
right, yeah.
That's the best way to do it. It's cheaper for our customers. It's better for the environment. It's easier for us.
And the system you put in it will last a whole lot longer than a brand new regular diesel engine.
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah, it'll, like you said, a normal diesel motor, 25,000 hours before you need to start thinking about a rebuild. As a generator, you're getting about 40 to 50,000 hours before you're starting to think about a rebuild.
What about the electric motor itself, like brushes, like all the components in the electric motor? Never mind the diesel motor, but the electric motor in your trucks. What's the service schedule on those?
Almost infinite for the electric motors. Like they're all brushless. They're liquid cooled. So if you damage them and like blow a coolant line and run them too hot, obviously you could do some damage. But for the way they're supposed to work, they should last almost indefinitely. All it is that a stator and some copper wire, a magnet that spins around some copper wire on some bearings. You might need to redo the bearings, but you go get some new FAG bearings. They cost you like $200. You pop the motor, put two brand new $200 bearings in there 10 years later. The copper can start to degrade over time, but you can pull those copper windings out, rewind them, put them back in there. You can watch guys in India and like flip-flops and a wood stove redoing copper windings. Like there's the mill in town here, Aspen Planers, runs a bunch of Laternos, and Laternos are diesel electric. Everything on them works. It's just got one diesel generator and electric motors to move the grapple, the swing arms, electric hub motors.
Yeah.
Their Laterno has been unloading hundreds of log trucks a day, every single day, and it's been in service since 1967. A piece of forestry equipment from the 60s still keeps up and can output like a brand new Cat 988 wheel loader. And this Laterno, it gets better mileage, works more efficiently, and it's lasts forever because electric takes no... I mean, the thing is the batteries. That is the one kicker when it comes to electric, is that your batteries degrade over time.
What's the calculation on that? Like, is there a like usage over time graph? Like how long would you how much life are you going to get out of those batteries if you use the truck as if the truck's doing 140,000 miles a year, let's say, like how long are the batteries going to last?
They estimate about within 10 years, the batteries will be at 50% capacity.
Right. And how much do the batteries cost? Now?
About $30,000.
So on one of your trucks, like never mind the frame or the wheels or anything, is the batteries the most expensive component?
Oh no, those e-axles are right now, but that's a weird case. We paid for a lot of custom engineering on that we had to recoup on like one or two trucks, but they'll come down in price, I'm sure, to the normal thing. The batteries are not as expensive as the axles, but they are the next largest cost for sure. And one of the difference with the diesel electric, though, that I would really like to point out to people is that in a normal electric truck, say with that Tesla semi, you get 500 miles, 10 years, 8 years later, wherever it works out to, you're down to that 50% rating. Now you can only do 250 miles. What you could do in a day is now half for your productivity of your truck. That would be super frustrating as a trucking company.
Right.
With the diesel generator, the capacity is half. So instead of firing up every 2 hours for half an hour to recharge the batteries, it needs to fire up every hour for 15 minutes. So your time that the diesel generator run in intervals gets smaller. The batteries still act as their peak load demand. They still give you that power. They still transfer it through, but the generator will have to come on as they'll discharge quicker. The generator has to come on quicker, but then it charges them up quicker because they're essentially smaller batteries and then shuts off. So you can push the service lifespan of the diesel electric running the batteries to almost 4 times the amount of a pure electric vehicle, which means that is a hell of a lot less battery mining going into it.
Wow, that's a great point. Because one of the, if you look at the discourse around electric vehicles and some of the people who are sort of skeptical of the environmental claims, and a lot of that has to do with the mining. You know,
it's not good.
All the rare earth minerals, all the lithium, the energy required to get the stuff out of the ground, the processing, the sort of countries where it comes from, not having the environmental regulations on their mining industry like we might have here. That's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah. And that's my big theory, is that if Tesla is basically putting almost a megawatt, we're putting a quarter of the batteries into our trucks. That's a quarter of the mining that needs to be done.
That's
you
amazing.
also get 2, 3, 4 times longer out of the batteries. So that quarter is then quartered. So our truck has almost like a fifth of the environmental damage from lithium mining than the other electric truck. So you do get more because you're burning fuel, but you're burning much less fuel than a normal diesel truck. You're burning that fuel much more efficiently, and you're not getting the environmental damage of the mining operation.
Right. So where's all of the so is there like a path being beaten to your door by venture capitalists going, here, take my money? Like what's going on here? Why?
Well, we haven't had any problem raising any investment money yet.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But
right
like,
now we're holding off because we did crowdfunding. We were, I think, one of Canada's largest, most successful crowdfunding campaigns. When we first opened it up, we raised $400,000 in 6 days, and that was enough. We closed it. That built our prototype. We're not taking any more money than we need to. The next one, we raised 1.5 million off of TikTok crowdfunding in 6 days again, and that let us get a shop, build the shop, build this full-on this first truck. And what I like about it is that I made a point the first round of investment to sit there and call all the people that gave us $1,000 or more to make sure that they were comfortable with it, let them know what we're doing, and really talk to them. And what I found out that sold me on the crowdfunding is that I would say 90% of them either owned a trucking company, were owner operators, or truck drivers. And the reason why they were investing in us is they wanted a better truck. They weren't investing in us. A lot of them said, I don't care if I get the money back as long as you build the truck that I can buy. My return on this investment is not the money I'm going to make in the market when you go public and IPO. My return on investment is when you sell me this truck, and I'm going to be able to run it. That's my return. That's why I'm giving you the $1,000, because I want a good truck. So we've kind of stayed away from the venture capitalist funding because I would rather have investors that just want to see a good truck than some Wall Street venture capitalist who says, well, when am I going to see my returns? And what are you going to put in there to make sure we can extract every dollar we can out of our customers? Our investors are the customers. They don't want to see us nickel and dime the customers, because they are the customers.
Wow. Dude. Man, I'm gonna go to the bank and send you some money. You can build me a truck.
You bet. We do have some larger investors wanting to come in once we get this thing done, but they are very much they want to invest in the way of like larger companies that have hundreds of trucks, and they want to invest, and then they want to guarantee the first 10 trucks sold. Like the first, okay, I want those 10 trucks, and part of my investment, basically, I'm going to buy these trucks at a crazy price, essentially, but I want to own a certain percentage of the company. Like I want 2% of the company. I'm going to buy 10 trucks. I'm going to give you the money to build these first 10 trucks, build a larger manufacturing shop, and we're going to work together. So it's kind of like those industry partners, but they want the truck. And I love that.
That's excellent. How many, so of all of your initial crowdfunding and interest you're getting, so obviously you have these guys that want like their first 10 trucks. What's the split, if there is any, between guys who want you to build something from the frame up brand new versus here, I have this like 88 Peterbilt sitting in my barn, make it electric for me. Like, is there a split that way? Like, how's it look?
It's about right straight down the middle of a 50-50 split.
Interesting.
And it's the one thing I've noticed is that the split doesn't differentiate between owner operators and larger companies. It's half the owner operators want a new truck, half of them want me to restore a classic. Half of the larger companies want me to upgrade their existing fleet, half of them just want a new truck.
Interesting. So speaking of the new truck, I was looking at your website and I found an unfortunate comparison to the Tesla Semi. No offense. Just, maybe this is just like a drawing thing and it's not actually going to be that way. Seat and steering wheel in the center of the truck rather than to either side.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Okay, so that was partly we had a design contest for the truck, and we had over 100 people submit drawings. We picked the top 10 we liked, and there was only one that had the center seating, and then we let people vote. 30,000 people voted, and that was the design that won. So we're gonna go with what people voted on.
What's the crossover between the people who voted and the people that actually gave you money and said, I want to buy a truck? Because
pretty strongly correlated, and I thought it was kind of crazy at first too.
Okay.
But now we've made the mock-up cab. The visibility is fantastic out of it. You can see down the sides of both. You ever ran a skidder in the bush?
No, sir.
Okay, if you run a skidder, it's basically the cab is a skidder cab or a D8 cab. You sit in the center of that dozer and you can look out both sides. You can see both ends of your blade. You can see all your attachments. And then I started like actually looking at it, and like different operations that are heavy vocational based, you rarely ever have a passenger with you. It makes sense on a logging truck to run that logging truck like a skidder. You can actually, we put in a swivel seat in it. So a place like a bed truck moving rigs is always looking out their rear window all the time.
Yeah.
Constantly looking over. With that middle seat, he can actually rotate his seat into the center, and he can watch his sitting in the middle, moving his rig truck around, his bed truck around site. So there was a snowplow. One of our customers wants a snowplow. You can see both ends of your snowplow right from the center seat. When you're running your wing that comes out off the side of the snowplow, you can see your wing come down. Normally you have to look in a convex mirror. You can actually see your wing coming down from that center seating position. Your visibility is so wicked good for being able to run all your attachments, all your things. Like we have one body manufacturer that makes equipment, and they have a joystick arm that comes down, and you can have two joysticks on each side of your driver's seat. So you can have like a loader, literally like running a loader, a skidder. One seat in the middle, and then joysticks for running whatever kind of auxiliary equipment you have off of that main seat.
Yeah, when you mentioned snowplows, I'm now thinking like I'm just thinking like a capitalist here, right? And like the growth opportunities for Edison. If you sold this whole package to say, I live in upstate New York, it snows here quite a bit. Like we get as much snow as Ontario does, and but twice the population. Interstate 90, lake effect snow. New York State has got like, I don't know how many tens of thousands of plow trucks, right?
Yep.
And if you came to New York State and said, I'm going to save you all this money on the maintenance of all your trucks because they're diesel electric and they have all these advantages, and we're going to save all this fuel, and you can like get your environmental bona fides, and the cab is in the middle for your plow operators. It's going to be more safe for them, and like you're just running around picking up government contracts selling plows, dude. Like it's just the bank, the stacks are piling up higher than the snow, buddy.
Well, and I'll make it the other point on the center seating cab. A lot of people were saying, well, redesign, like get something like a Kenworth W9, get something like a long nose Pete, or other people, I want a more aerodynamic truck. And we tried to make like a nice long nose truck that looked like it. And like a few of the designs look like that. We put a bunch of those in there, but you know what? They all look like just copies of a W9 that don't look right. And we kind of thought about it, like if a company wants the traditional two-seater truck, W9 or whatever truck they want, they can just bring us that and we can put our driveline into a W9. Why are we trying to redesign a W9?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean,
if we're going to build a cab, give them the cab that, like, give them something unique. Give them, like, they're coming to us for a cab because nobody else makes that skidder vocational cab.
Right. And it's also follows branding. It's the Edison truck. It's the Edison cab, right? Like that totally makes sense. I mean, if I was to buy one of your trucks, no offense to Edison, I'd do the glider kit thing. Here's a Peterbilt. This is what I want. Put the stuff in it, but I want the Peterbilt cab, right?
Yeah.
Or an auto, or like my Uncle Bruce's, my Twitter profile photo is a picture of my dad in front of my late Uncle Bruce's 1976 auto car. That thing looks like a badass truck. Take the old auto car and put your Edison system in it, buddy. Oh yeah.
I was just thinking for that cab design, and there's a company that they run out of I think it's Norway, that make the self-loading log trucks. And they make them for like tractors and different equipment. But their cab sits on a little hydraulic thing, electric scissor lift that the whole cab lifts up. I was thinking about that. You got me thinking right now. What about for a self-loader? You just put something like that under the cab with the center seating position that you can swivel the seat right around. When it comes time to load your truck, your cab just lifts up 6 feet on the air on a scissor lift. Your 2 joysticks are right beside you. And you don't have to sit on this tiny little stool out in the middle of the cold. You don't even have to get out of your truck cab. You pull your outriggers down, hit a button, your cab lifts up, you swing your seat around, you got your joysticks that fold down right behind you, and it's like running a little excavator. You hit a button, the cab goes back down, and now you're trucking again.
So now the question is, who gets to you first, New York State DOT or all the logging truck guys around here? I mean, man, you're singing everybody's song, Chace. Like the possibilities here are endless.
You know what I don't get? Why hasn't this been done? Why is it taking a couple loggers up in a small town in Canada to do this?
A good question. I mean, well, there's the inertia, right? So like, I think about the same questions with like, so I drove truck in Australia. I got one of them working holiday visas. So much like yourself, I full of piss and vinegar, wanted to go adventure. And a few years ago, I took my wife with me and I went and I drove triple road trains for these guys in Perth. So I was going up and down the West Coast. And I've always been a big fan of Australia and a big fan of efficiency, right? Much like you are. And I've always wondered, like, why don't we have more efficient trucks? Like everyone talks about trying to save the environment and not have so many emissions. And you got all these little trucks in the US running around at 80 grand, basically like at half or 1/3 the loading a lot of other places in the world do, And why doesn't anyone try to upgrade the infrastructure to be able to handle this, or build some hump yards, like pick some interstates that are flat, build hump yards at certain exits, and then just have running doubles. Like they do that in some places, New York State Thruway, Florida Turnpike, Indiana. There's a few places they do it, but they don't do it all the way across the country. And it's like, it's the same thing. Like, why did it take these guys in BC to do this? Well, there's just certain types of inertia, like inertia of thinking, inertia of bureaucracy, inertia of like accepted norms, and people just kind of shrugging their shoulders and going along with the status quo. And obviously, you're not the kind of guy to just shrug your shoulders. Like, you've got some vision and you can see the benefits to this thing you want to build, you know? And
Yep.
unfortunately, in the Pareto distribution of vision, you guys are at the extreme end and there's not that many people around, right? Like, there's only so many Chace Barbers and Elon Musks in the world, right? If I may be, if I may be so bold as to like tarnish the name of Chace Barber by comparing him to a lesser human being like Elon Musk.
I'm gonna say, you son of a bitch. You know what? Like, Elon gets some bad rap. He's really did a lot. I think it's just one of those cases of live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Well, he's just got his fingers in so many pies, and like, you know, there's sort of a truism. I mean, this is not a directly related quote, but it's somewhat related. Like, Winston Churchill said, like, you know, if you don't have any enemies, that means you've never stood up for anything. Maybe I got that wrong, but like,
Nope.
so like Elon Musk, you know, love him or hate him, the guy's like building space technology, internet technology, cars. You know, I don't like how much government money he's taken. Like, the guy's soaked the taxpayer for all kinds of shit. And
no, you'll be pleased to learn that Edison has not gotten a single dime of taxpayer money.
fantastic.
I mean, not from us trying, but like, we just they don't give us shit.
Oh, fantastic. And like, you know, Mr. Musk has done some dirty stuff with the Chinese government to kind of placate them, and they're evil and he shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, the dude is like one of the most hyper efficient people on the planet. He's got vision, he builds cool stuff, right? So like, you're going to get good with the bad. There's no way of having like some perfect person.
Yeah,
right?
he gets shit done, and he's a person at the end of the day. Like, you gotta admire what he can do to, like, you know what? I want electric cars. He just goes out and he makes them happen. Like, everyone's like, you can't start a car company, and he did it.
Right.
And then people are like, well, you can't start a space company. He's like, yes, I can, and he did it.
And
now
you can't start a diesel electric logging truck company. Well, sure you can.
Yeah, I think there's too many people that say, well, you can't do that, and you just sometimes you got to do it.
Right.
Like, if I had to listen to all the people that says, like, no, you can't do that. No, absolutely not. Like, you're insane to even try that. We never would have started.
Right. So speaking of listening, I want to tread lightly here, because when I was first trying to set this discussion up with you, you mentioned that you had a dinner date with your fiance, and then you had this delay, so we started late.
Shit. Yep.
Am
shit. I? oh God, I forgot about that.
Oh no! It didn't. I didn't really have to remind you about that, did I? Did you really forget?
Yeah. This is
okay. Chace, listen.
I'm in trouble,
dude. Okay, listen. Here's what's going on. I want to thank you very much for your time. I want you to pimp all your stuff. Tell us the name of your website. Tell us how people can find you. Do it.
Yeah. My name is Chace Barber. You can find me on TikTok at Chace Barber, or Edison Motors. We have is at _.edison.motors, because I didn't make a TikTok account when I announced Edison Motors, and some guy made at Edison Motors, and he's like, I'll sell it to you for $300. And I'm like, fuck you, I'll just put an underscore in front of it. Yeah, and that level of cheap and petty. But if not, the website is www.edisonmotors.ca. I'm just been working on a new website, updating it with all the latest spec sheets for all our trucks. So all the technical, nerdy information is finally going to be hitting our website here in the next couple days.
Awesome.
Probably by the time this podcast is out right now. Actually, if you're listening to this podcast now, that is out, and check that out because you can nerd out on technical information.
Yeah, today, FYI, is December 9th. I don't know if it'll be January probably before this hits the airwaves.
Oh yeah, the website's there. You go check it out.
All right. Well, all right, dude, thank you so much for coming. I'm so impressed with your entire story, and I guarantee you that everybody listening to this will have been impressed with it as well. That we're going to have to do a follow-up and talk again about this in a couple months, and we'll see where Edison is. We'll see where your technology has gone to, how many trucks you've built, how much more testing you've done. Like, they're out in the woods. They're pulling a Super B train full of logs. I want to hear more about this, and I'm sure other people do.
You bet. We'll definitely have to do that if my fiance doesn't kill me. I'm in trouble. I have 6 mixed text messages. I just looked at my phone now.
Oh no. Okay, dude. All right. Go.
All right, kid. Thanks for having me on.
No, man. Thank you so much. All right. Take care, Chace. Go get her.